Hey guys, so it's Thursday night and it's time for Wake, but before that starts, I'm here a little early to record this Devo for you. Today I'm going to be reading out of 1 Peter 4, verses 1 and 2. Since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same measure of thinking, for whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live for the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. So a couple things stick out to me in these verses. First of all, the word suffered. It's not a kind word. It's not a word we like to hear. We don't like to think about suffering. We don't like to think about pain, especially in our culture today. That's something that our culture teaches us to avoid, is avoid pain, avoid suffering, make life more comfortable for yourself, that sort of thing. But what we see here is that Christ suffered for us on the cross. You know, it wasn't nice going to the cross. It wasn't pleasant. It hurt a lot, and he died because of it. And likewise, it doesn't say that we might suffer. It says we're gonna suffer. That's guaranteed, you know. This life is not going to be easy for us because we don't belong to the kingdom of the earth. We belong to the kingdom of heaven. And so what Peter's talking about here is not, oh, if you suffer, here's how to deal with it. He says, when this happens, when you have reached the point of recognizing Christ as Lord, it's going to lead to some suffering sometimes. But God has equipped us to get through that suffering and to pass it and to overcome it through the strength that he gives us, so as to live for the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. So what that part of the passage says to me is, not only did Christ die to save us, but to give us purpose. We're not meant to just be saved and then to say, well, that's it. I made it. I'm saved. I don't have to do anything else. We were saved because we were created with a purpose originally, and we broke away from that purpose through our sin. And that purpose was to glorify God in everything that we say and do. So the reason Christ died was to reconcile us, to bring us back to that purpose, and to say, this is the moment in which you go back to living the life you were meant to live. You go back to living for God's will, not for human passions. And that's huge. That completely redefines our understanding of Jesus' death on the cross. It's no longer just about rescue, although it is about that. We were rescued from our sin, but it's not just about being rescued from our sin. It's about being rescued so that we can be sent out as missionaries, as ministers of God's word, to reach others and to show them what Jesus did on the cross for them. And that, to me, is so much more exciting than just being redeemed. Being redeemed is an awesome, awesome thing. Being saved by what Christ did on the cross, by his death and his resurrection, is an amazing thing. But if I'm just saved so that I can say I'm saved, that gets old very quickly. And that's where I think a lot of Christians start to fall away from their faith, is when they think that their salvation is just for the sake of salvation. It's not. Christ saved us so that we could be the human beings we were meant to be before the fall, human beings created in God's image and reflecting that image, showing other people what God is like through the way we live our lives. So Peter is essentially saying here, you have a choice. Christ has died so that you have the freedom to choose between your will and God's. I hope you guys choose God's will.